The coffee maker gurgled its morning protest as I watched Ayla zip her designer suitcase with the practiced efficiency of someone who traveled frequently for work. She'd been doing a lot of that lately. Traveling, I mean. Miami this time. Another conference with her law firm's biggest client. "You sure you don't want me to call an Uber?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter with my mug. The ceramic felt warm against my palms, grounding me in this moment that felt strangely significant. Ayla smoothed her blazer and checked her reflection in the microwave door. After 19 years of marriage, I knew her tells. The way she touched her earrings when nervous, how she cleared her throat before delivering bad news, the slight tremor in her voice when she wasn't being entirely truthful. "Evan, you hate airport traffic," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Besides, parking is expensive." I set down my coffee and grabbed my keys from the hook. "Perfect. I'll drive you to the airport." Her face went pale for just a second, so quick another husband might have missed it. But I wasn't just any husband. I was Evan Mercer, former FBI counterintelligence specialist, current private security consultant, and apparently soon-to-be expert in marital surveillance. "Really, the Uber is already—" "Nonsense." I lifted her suitcase, noting its weight, heavy for a 3-day conference. What kind of husband would I be if I let my wife take a ride-share to catch a flight? The drive to the airport took 43 minutes through morning traffic. Ayla spent most of it checking her phone, typing messages she angled away from my view. She'd been doing that for weeks now, the secretive texting, the late nights at the office, the sudden interest in new lingerie that I never got to appreciate. "So remind me," I said, navigating toward the departure terminal. "What's this conference about again?" "Corporate litigation strategies, new developments in class action defense." The words came out rehearsed, like she'd practiced them. "Hale thinks the Miami market could be huge for the firm." Hale Trenwick, her boss. 48 years old, divorced twice, drove a Tesla, and had the kind of smile that made you want to count your wallet afterward. I'd met him at the firm's Christmas party last year. He'd gripped my hand too long and called me sport. "Hale's going too, then?" Another tell. She touched her earrings. "Several partners are attending. It's a major client event." I pulled up to the departure curb and popped the trunk. Ayla was already reaching for her purse, eager to escape what had become an increasingly uncomfortable car ride. I took my time getting out, walking around to retrieve her suitcase. "Have a safe flight," I said, kissing her cheek. Her perfume was different, something expensive and unfamiliar. "Text me when you land." "Of course." She managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Love you." I watched her disappear through the automatic doors, pulling her suitcase toward the security checkpoint. She moved with purpose, checking her phone again as she joined the line. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see her scanning the terminal, looking for someone. That someone appeared near Gate 14, tall, silver-haired, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Hale Trenwick embraced my wife like they were reuniting after months apart instead of colleagues who'd supposedly just met up for a business trip. I sat in my car for another 20 minutes, watching them through those windows. They stood close together, his hand on the small of her back. She laughed at something he said, the genuine laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months. When their flight was called, he carried her bag. The drive home gave me time to think, time to plan, time to decide whether I was going to be the kind of husband who pretended not to notice, or the kind who did something about it. I chose option 2. My home office occupied what used to be our guest bedroom, computer equipment, surveillance gear, files from my consulting work, the tools of someone who made a living finding things people wanted to keep hidden. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd been so focused on other people's secrets that I'd missed the one growing in my own house. I opened my laptop and accessed the software I'd installed 3 weeks ago. Call it professional paranoia or husband's intuition, but something about Ayla's behavior had triggered my investigative instincts. The phone cloning had been simple. 30 seconds with her device while she showered, and I had access to everything. Her location showed up as a red dot on my screen. Not at the Miami Convention Center, where the conference was supposedly happening. At the Fontainebleau Hotel on Miami Beach. The same hotel where she'd been spending her conference nights for the past 2 months. I scrolled through her text messages, finding the thread that confirmed what I already suspected. The messages between Ayla and Hale went back 6 months. They started professional enough, case discussions, client strategies, scheduling meetings, but by month 3, they'd evolved into something else entirely. Can't wait to have you alone in Miami, read one from last week. Tell Evan it's a working weekend, replied another. He's so clueless. Sometimes I think he's given up on us completely. That last one stung more than I expected. Maybe because it wasn't entirely wrong. I had been distant lately, buried in work, taking our marriage for granted. But there's a difference between growing apart and betrayal. There's a difference between neglect and deception. I printed the most damaging messages along with hotel receipts I found in her email and photos from her social media that showed a lot more Miami Beach time than conference room time. The evidence painted a clear picture of a woman who'd been living a double life for half a year. My phone buzzed with a text from Ayla. Landed safely. Conference starts early tomorrow. Probably won't be able to talk much this weekend. I typed back, no problem. Take care of business. The doorbell rang as I was organizing the printed evidence into a folder. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I recognized but had never actually met, Leora Selrick, Hale's wife. She stood on my front porch holding a manila envelope and wearing an expression that suggested she knew exactly why she was there. I opened the door. Mrs. Selrick, Mr. Mercer, I think we need to talk. She was smaller than she appeared in the photos I'd seen at firm events, maybe 5'4", with graying brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She wore jeans and a sweater, the kind of casual outfit that said she'd been planning this visit for a while. Please, come in. I led her to the living room, noting how she took in the details of my house with the same analytical attention I used when assessing security risks. She sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching her envelope like a lifeline. I assume you know why I'm here, she said. I have a pretty good idea. She opened her envelope and spread its contents across my coffee table. Hotel receipts going back 4 months. Credit card statements showing charges for jewelry I'd never seen Ayla wear. Restaurant bills for 2 at places I'd never been. Phone records showing hundreds of calls between Hale and my wife. I found the first receipt in February, Leora said. Hale told me it was a client dinner, but then I found more. Different cities, always when he claimed to be traveling alone for business. I added my own folder to the collection. When did you figure out it was Ayla? Last month. I hired a private investigator. She pulled out a series of photographs, Hale and Ayla entering hotels together, sharing intimate dinners, walking hand in hand along a beach that definitely wasn't a conference venue. Your wife isn't very careful about her social media privacy settings. We sat in silence for a moment, 2 people whose spouses had decided we weren't worth their honesty. The evidence spread between us told a story of calculated deception, of 2 people who'd thought they were smarter than their partners. What do you want to do about it? I asked. Leora's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I want them to understand that actions have consequences. I want them to feel what we felt when we discovered the truth. And I want to make sure they never have the chance to do this to anyone else. I'm listening. Hale thinks I'm a naive housewife who doesn't understand his business. Your wife thinks you're too trusting to ever suspect her. They've underestimated both of us. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. I say we show them exactly how wrong they are. The plan she outlined was elegant in its simplicity. Hale and Ayla had gotten comfortable in their deception, careless in their communication. They'd left digital footprints everywhere, credit card records, phone logs, hotel reservations, even a pregnancy termination that Hale had paid for in cash last month. You have access to all this? I asked, reviewing the financial documents. Joint accounts, joint credit cards, joint everything. Hale never bothered to hide his transactions because he assumed I'd never look. Leora's laugh was bitter. 22 years of marriage, and he still thinks I'm the same trusting girl he married. And you want to do this at the airport? Maximum impact, minimum escape routes. They'll be trapped in a public space with nowhere to run and no way to spin the story. She gathered her papers back into the envelope. I've already booked a flight to Miami, same terminal, same time as their return flight tomorrow. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. What do you need from me? Moral support, and maybe someone to document the moment for posterity. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that matched my mood perfectly. I'd spent the weekend planning, preparing, and trying not to think about the 19 years of marriage that were about to end in a very public way. Ayla had texted sporadically throughout her conference weekend, generic messages about boring seminars and networking events. Each message was a small lie, and I found myself analyzing them like evidence in a case file. The timestamps didn't match her supposed schedule. The background noise in her voice messages sounded more like beach waves than hotel conference rooms. How's the conference going? I'd texted Saturday night. Exhausting but productive, learning a lot about new litigation strategies. Meanwhile, her social media showed cocktails by a pool and sunset photos that definitely weren't taken from a conference room. She'd been careful not to include Hale in any of the shots, but his reflection was visible in her sunglasses in one photo. Amateur mistake for someone trying to maintain a secret. I met Leora at the airport 2 hours before Ayla's scheduled arrival. She looked different than she had in my living room, more composed, more determined. She carried a leather portfolio and wore the kind of business casual outfit that suggested she belonged in an airport terminal. You ready for this? I asked as we positioned ourselves near the baggage claim area. I've been ready since February. She opened her portfolio, revealing enlarged printouts of text messages, photos, and financial records. Everything was laminated and organized with the precision of someone who'd spent months planning this moment. The question is whether you're ready to watch your marriage end in public. I considered that. Was I ready? Probably not. But I was definitely ready to stop living with someone who thought I was too stupid to notice her lies. What about afterward? I asked. Have you thought about what happens next? Divorce papers are already filed. I'm claiming adultery and financial misconduct. Hale's been using company funds to pay for their hotels. Leora's smile was cold. My lawyer says it's one of the most well-documented cases of marital fraud he's ever seen. The terminal gradually filled with Sunday travelers, families returning from vacation, business people heading home after weekend conferences, couples saying goodbye after romantic getaways, normal people living normal lives, unaware they were about to witness a very public reckoning. Ayla's flight landed on time. I tracked it on my phone, watching the little airplane icon taxi to the gate. My stomach felt like I'd swallowed a handful of quarters, but my hands were steady. Years of FBI training had taught me to compartmentalize emotions during operations. This was just another operation. There, Leora said, pointing toward the security exit. Hale appeared first, pulling a rolling suitcase and checking his phone. He looked relaxed, satisfied, like a man who'd just spent a successful weekend mixing business with pleasure. His silver hair was perfectly styled despite the flight, and his expensive suit showed no signs of travel wrinkles. Ayla emerged 30 seconds later, maintaining the pretense that they'd traveled separately. She looked beautiful, tanned from their beach time, wearing a sundress I'd never seen before. Her hair was lighter than when she'd left, probably from a salon visit she'd disguise as a conference expense. They didn't immediately acknowledge each other, playing their roles as professional colleagues who'd happened to be on the same flight. Hale headed toward baggage claim while Ayla stopped at a coffee kiosk, probably planning to, accidentally, run into him near the luggage carousel. "Showtime," Leora murmured. She walked directly toward Hale, her heels clicking on the terminal floor with military precision. I followed at a distance, my phone ready to document everything. Other travelers moved around us, focused on their own journeys, unaware they were about to witness something extraordinary. Hale spotted his wife when she was still 20 feet away. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally, pure panic. He actually took a step backward, like he could somehow retreat from the situation. "Hello, darling," Leora said loudly enough for nearby travelers to hear. "Surprise." She held up the first laminated printout, a text message from Hale to Ayla that read, "Can't wait to wake up next to you in Miami." The font was large enough to read from 10 feet away. "Leora, how did you get here? Same way you did. I bought a plane ticket." She held up another printout, this one showing their hotel room charge for champagne and strawberries. "Though I didn't expense it to your company credit card." Ayla appeared at the edge of my peripheral vision, drawn by the commotion. I watched her face as she processed the scene. Her lover confronted by his wife, evidence of their affair displayed like protest signs, curious travelers starting to gather and stare. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Indeed," I said, stepping up beside her. "This is awkward." She spun toward me, her face cycling through the same emotions I'd seen on Hale's. "Evan, what are you doing here?" "Supporting a friend." I nodded toward Leora, who was now holding up a credit card statement showing charges for the jewelry Ayla was currently wearing. Funny thing about joint bank accounts, they keep very detailed records. The crowd around us was growing. Airport terminals are like small cities, and word of an unfolding drama spreads quickly. People pulled out phones, some probably thinking they were witnessing a celebrity scandal or a social media stunt. "This is insane," Hale said, trying to grab the printouts from his wife's hands. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" Leora's voice carried across the terminal. "You spent 6 months making a mockery of our marriage, and I'm the one making a scene?" She held up another document, the receipt from the pregnancy termination. Several people in the crowd gasped. Ayla's face went white. "That's private," Ayla said desperately. "You can't just—" "Private?" I pulled out my own phone, showing her the screenshots I'd taken of her text messages. "Like these conversations about how clueless your husband is, how easy it was to lie to him about your business trips?" Airport security was approaching now, drawn by the crowd and the raised voices. But Leora wasn't finished. She had months of evidence to display, and she was going to show every piece of it. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the growing audience, "I present to you a master class in adultery and financial fraud." She spread the remaining printouts on top of a nearby luggage cart, like she was dealing cards. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, spa treatments. A complete record of their affair funded by company money and family savings. "This is harassment," Hale said, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked like a man who'd just realized his carefully constructed lie was collapsing in the most public way possible. "This is consequences," Leora replied. "This is what happens when you think your wife is too stupid to check the credit card statements." Airport security reached us just as Leora held up her final piece of evidence, a photo of Hale and Ayla kissing on a beach, taken from Ayla's own social media account. "Is there a problem here?" the security officer asked. "No problem at all," Leora said sweetly. "Just a wife, returning some property to her husband." She handed Hale a manila envelope. "Divorce papers. You've been served." The crowd began to disperse as security took control of the situation, but the damage was done. Dozens of people had witnessed the confrontation, and several had recorded it on their phones. By evening, the video would be circulating on social media with captions like, "Cheating husband gets exposed at airport," and "Wife's revenge goes viral." Ayla stood frozen in the middle of it all, still holding her coffee, still wearing the jewelry her lover had bought her with his wife's money. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger or defiance, but genuine fear. "Evan, please, can we just go home and talk about this?" I looked at my wife of 19 years, this woman I'd loved and trusted and built a life with. This woman who'd spent 6 months lying to my face while planning romantic getaways with her boss. This woman who'd thought I was too stupid or too trusting to ever figure it out. "No," I said simply. "I don't think we can." The drive home from the airport was the longest 43 minutes of my life. Ayla sat in the passenger seat, crying quietly and occasionally trying to start conversations I wasn't ready to have. The evidence folder sat between us like a roadblock, containing printed proof of everything she'd probably hoped I'd never discover. "The house locks have been changed," I said as we pulled into our driveway. She looked up from her tissue. "What?" "I had a locksmith come yesterday. Your things are packed and in the garage." "Evan, you can't just—" "I can, actually. I checked with my lawyer. Since you've been using our joint accounts to fund your affair, I have grounds for immediate separation." I parked and turned off the engine. The prenup we signed has a very specific clause about infidelity. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "You knew about the prenup clause?" "I wrote the prenup clause, remember? I'm the one who insisted on it because I'd seen too many FBI colleagues get destroyed in messy divorces." I handed her the garage remote. "Your car is in there too. Keys are in the ignition." The next few hours were surreal. Ayla loaded her belongings into her sedan while I watched from the kitchen window, drinking coffee and trying to process the fact that my marriage was ending on a Sunday afternoon in October. She'd packed efficiently: clothes, personal items, some books, the jewelry Hale had bought her. She left behind the photos, the shared memories, the accumulated artifacts of 2 decades together. My phone buzzed with a text from Leora. "How did it go?" "She's moving out now," I typed back. "What about Hale?" "Locked out of our house, fired from his job as of tomorrow morning, and facing a lawsuit for misappropriation of company funds. I'd say it's been a productive day." I had to admire Leora's thoroughness. While I'd been focused on the emotional betrayal, she'd been building a legal case that would destroy both of them professionally and financially. She'd spent months documenting every transaction, every lie, every abuse of trust and company resources. Ayla knocked on the front door around 6 o'clock. I opened it but didn't invite her in. "I need to explain," she said. "No, you don't." "Evan, please. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. It just developed over time." I leaned against the door frame, studying her face. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her exposed secrets. "How long?" 6 months. Maybe 7. "The real answer, Ayla." She sighed. 8 months. It started last Christmas at the office party. The office party where I'd met Hale, where he'd called me sport and held my hand too long, where Ayla had seemed unusually animated, laughing at his jokes and touching his arm when she talked to him. I'd noticed it then, but dismissed it as professional networking. "Was any of it real?" I asked. "The conferences, the business trips, the late nights at the office?" "Some of it. The Miami conference was real, we just extended it into a personal trip. Using company money. That was Hale's decision. I told him it was risky." I almost laughed. "You told him it was risky. Not wrong, not dishonest, not a betrayal of your marriage and his, just risky. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did, and now you're facing the consequences." She stood on my doorstep for another few minutes, trying to find words that might repair what she'd broken. But some things can't be fixed with explanations or apologies. Some betrayals are too complete, too calculated, too deliberate. "Where will you go?" I asked finally. "My sister's place in Portland, at least until I figure out what's next." What about your job? Her face crumpled. HR called while I was packing. They're conducting an investigation into Hale's expense reports. I'm suspended pending the outcome. The law firm wouldn't survive the scandal. A managing partner using company funds to finance an affair with a subordinate was the kind of story that destroyed reputations and ended careers. Ayla would be lucky to find work as a paralegal after this, let alone as a practicing attorney. I'm sorry, she said as she turned to leave. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this. I watched her drive away, then closed the door and walked through my house. My house now, not our house. It felt different already, like the absence of her deception had changed the very air. I made dinner for one, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, and tried to figure out what came next. My phone rang around 9 o'clock. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Mercer, this is Janet Chen from Channel 7 News. We understand you were involved in an incident at the airport today involving your wife and her employer. Would you be willing to comment? I hung up without responding. The phone rang again immediately. Different number, different reporter, same request, then again, and again. By 10 o'clock, I'd received calls from 3 local news stations, 2 newspapers, and something called Midwest Scandal Weekly. Leora's airport confrontation had gone viral exactly as she'd planned. The video showed everything. The laminated evidence, the shocked faces, the crowd of onlookers, the moment when both Hale and Ayla realized their secret was being broadcast to the world. I turned off my phone and poured another glass of wine. The next morning brought more reporters, this time camped outside my house with cameras and microphones. I left through the back door and drove to my office downtown, where my assistant greeted me with a stack of message slips and a concerned expression. Rough weekend? She asked. You could say that. The phone's been ringing all morning. Reporters, mostly, but also some potential clients who saw the news coverage. Apparently, there's demand for security consultants who can handle domestic intelligence gathering. I flipped through the messages. 3 divorce attorneys, 2 private investigation firms, and a literary agent who wanted to discuss book and movie rights to my story. The modern world's ability to turn personal tragedy into entertainment never ceased to amaze me. Hold all calls for now, I said. I need some time to process this. My computer showed 47 new emails, most from strangers offering sympathy, advice, or business propositions. A few were from friends who'd seen the news coverage and wanted to check on me. One was from my brother in Seattle. Saw the video. Are you okay? Call me. But the one that caught my attention was from Hale Trenwick himself, sent at 3:17 a.m. Evan, it read, I know you have every right to hate me. What happened between Ayla and me was wrong, and I take full responsibility for my actions. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I never intended for things to go as far as they did. I respect what you're going through, and I won't contact you again. I hope you can find some peace in all this. I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decide how I felt about it. Was it a genuine apology or damage control? Did it matter? Hale's intentions were irrelevant now. He'd made his choices, and those choices had consequences that extended far beyond his marriage or his career. I deleted the email without responding. The rest of the week passed in a blur of legal meetings, media requests, and the strange sensation of watching my private life become public entertainment. The video of Leora's airport confrontation had been viewed over 2 million times across various social media platforms. People were taking sides, offering opinions, and turning our personal tragedy into a morality play about trust, betrayal, and revenge. Friday afternoon, my lawyer called with an update. Ayla's attorney wants to negotiate, he said. They're willing to accept the prenup terms without contest in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce. How quick? 60 days if you agree to seal the proceedings and avoid further media attention. I thought about it. The media circus was exhausting, and I had no interest in prolonging the spectacle. But I also wasn't inclined to make things easier for someone who'd spent 8 months lying to me. Counteroffer, I said. 30 days, she covers her own legal fees, and she signs a non-disclosure agreement about my business and personal affairs. Done. She's not in a position to negotiate. That evening, I met Leora for dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown. She looked better than she had at the airport, more relaxed, like someone who'd finally set down a heavy burden. How are you holding up? I asked. Better than expected. You? Same. It's strange how liberating the truth can be, even when it's painful. She raised her wine glass. To the truth, and to people who think they're smarter than their spouses. To consequences, I replied. We ate in comfortable silence, two people who'd been through something extraordinary together. The restaurant was nearly empty, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe normally. What's next for you? Leora asked as we waited for dessert. I'm not sure. My business is busier than ever. Apparently, public humiliation is good for the private investigation industry. But personally, I have no idea. It gets easier, she said. The anger fades, the hurt becomes manageable. Eventually, you start to see it as a gift. A gift? Freedom. The chance to build something real with someone who actually deserves your trust. I considered that as we finished dinner and walked to our cars. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. Change was coming, whether I was ready for it or not. Thank you, I said as we reached Leora's car. For what? For having the courage to do what needed to be done, for not letting them get away with it. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. Thank you for being there, for proving that some people still understand the difference between right and wrong. I drove home through streets that looked different somehow, like I was seeing my city with new eyes. The house felt different too, not empty but clean, free of the weight of secrets and lies that had been suffocating it for months. I poured myself a drink and sat in my study, surrounded by the tools of my trade, computers, cameras, surveillance equipment, files full of other people's secrets. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of rebuilding my life. I'd figure out what came after a 19-year marriage ended in a viral video at an airport terminal. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I could sleep peacefully. The truth, as painful as it had been, had set me free. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my office reviewing a case file when my assistant buzzed the intercom. Mr. Mercer, there's a woman here to see you. Says her name is Patricia Williams, and she has a situation that requires your particular expertise. I looked up from the insurance fraud case I'd been working on. Since the airport incident, my business had tripled. Apparently, the story of a security consultant who'd exposed his wife's affair had resonated with people facing similar situations. I'd become the go-to investigator for suspicious spouses and betrayed partners. Send her in. Patricia Williams was in her 50s, well-dressed, with the kind of controlled composure that suggested she was holding herself together through sheer willpower. She sat across from my desk and placed a folder between us, a gesture that had become familiar over the past few weeks. Mr. Mercer, I need to know if my husband is having an affair. I'd heard those words dozens of times recently. The consultation that followed was standard: suspicious behavior, unexplained absences, changes in routine and attitude. Patricia's husband was a successful businessman who'd been taking frequent trips to Chicago for client meetings that never seemed to generate any new business. How long has this been going on? I asked. 6 months. Maybe longer. She opened her folder and showed me credit card statements, phone bills, and a collection of receipts that painted a familiar picture. I found these in his office. I reviewed the documents with the practiced eye of someone who'd become an expert in recognizing the patterns of deception. expensive dinners for two, hotel charges that didn't match his supposed business schedule, purchases from jewelry stores and lingerie boutiques. Mrs. Williams, based on what you've shown me, I'd say your suspicions are well-founded. The question is, what do you want to do about it? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. I want to do what you did. I want to expose him in a way that makes it impossible for him to deny or minimize what he's done. Over the following weeks, I helped Patricia build her case. We documented her husband's movements, confirmed his affair with a colleague from his Chicago office, and gathered evidence of his financial deception. When the time came for confrontation, Patricia chose a different venue than Leora had, the company Christmas party, in front of his colleagues, clients, and the woman he'd been seeing. The result was swift and decisive. Patricia's husband lost his job, his reputation, and his marriage in a single evening. The other woman transferred to a different city to escape the scandal. Patricia filed for divorce with enough evidence to ensure a favorable settlement. I can't thank you enough, she told me afterward. You gave me the tools to take control of my own life. That became my new specialty, helping people take control of situations where they'd been betrayed, deceived, or manipulated. Each case was different, but the underlying pattern was always the same. Someone had chosen to lie rather than face the truth, and eventually, the truth had caught up with them. The divorce from Ayla was finalized on a Tuesday morning in November. We met at the courthouse, signed the papers, and went our separate ways without speaking. She looked thinner than I remembered, worn down by the consequences of her choices. Her legal career was over, her reputation destroyed, her future uncertain. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't regret what had happened. Actions have consequences, and some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Hale had disappeared entirely after losing his job and his marriage. Rumors suggested he'd moved to another state to start over, but I didn't investigate. He was no longer my concern. Leora and I stayed in touch, meeting occasionally for coffee or dinner. She'd started her own business, a consulting firm that helped women navigate divorce proceedings and protect their financial interests. Her experience with Hale had taught her valuable lessons about hidden assets, financial manipulation, and the importance of thorough documentation. We should write a book, she suggested one evening over dinner. A guide for people who suspect their spouses are cheating. What would we call it? Terminal Betrayal, a Survival Guide. I laughed. That's not bad. 6 months after the airport incident, I received an unexpected phone call. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. Evan, this is Ayla. I almost hung up, but curiosity got the better of me. What do you want? I'm calling to apologize. I know it's too late and I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed you to hear it from me. Okay, I was wrong. Not just about the affair, but about everything. I convinced myself that our marriage was over anyway, that you didn't care about me anymore, that I deserved to be happy even if it meant hurting you. I listened without responding, letting her say whatever she needed to say. I see now how selfish that was. How cruel. You didn't deserve what I did to you, and I'm sorry. Where are you now? I asked. Portland. Working as a paralegal for a small firm. It's not much, but it's honest work. Good. Are you okay? I know this has been hard on you too. I thought about how to answer that. Was I okay? In some ways, yes. My business was thriving. I'd found a sense of purpose in helping other people navigate similar situations, and I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd thought. But I was also 45 years old, starting over after 19 years of marriage, trying to figure out what came next. I'm better than I was, I said finally. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy, Evan. You deserve someone who appreciates what you have to offer. After she hung up, I sat in my office thinking about forgiveness, redemption, and the possibility of second chances. Not for us, That ship had sailed and sunk, but for both of us, individually. People make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, but that doesn't mean they can't learn from them and become better. A year later, my life had settled into a new rhythm. My business continued to grow, specializing in cases involving marital deception and financial fraud. I'd helped dozens of people expose cheating spouses, hidden assets, and various forms of domestic betrayal. Each case was a reminder that trust, once broken, was almost impossible to repair. I'd also started dating again, carefully, slowly, with the hard-earned wisdom of someone who'd learned not to take honesty for granted. The woman I was seeing was a fellow investigator, someone who understood the importance of truth and the cost of deception. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked one evening as we walked through downtown. "The way you handled things with your wife?" I considered the question. Did I regret the public humiliation, the viral video, the media circus that had followed? Did I regret destroying Ayla's career and reputation along with our marriage? "No," I said finally. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that she made choices that led to that moment. But I don't regret holding her accountable for those choices." "Even though it hurt you too?" "Sometimes the truth hurts everyone involved. That doesn't make it less important." We walked in comfortable silence, past the courthouse where my divorce had been finalized, past the law firm where Ayla used to work, past the airport where everything had come to a head on a Sunday afternoon in October. The city looked different to me now, not because it had changed, but because I had. I'd learned that the person you trust most can be the person who betrays you most completely. I'd learned that some secrets are too big to keep hidden forever. And I'd learned that sometimes the only way to move forward is to burn everything down and start over. My phone buzzed with a text from a potential client. "Mr. Mercer, I think my husband is having an affair. Can you help me find the truth?" I looked at the message, then at the woman beside me, then at the city around us full of people living their lives, keeping their secrets, making their choices. "Yes," I typed back. "I can help you find the truth." Because that's what I did now. I found the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I helped people face reality, confront deception, and take control of their lives. It wasn't always pretty, and it wasn't always kind, but it was necessary. The truth, I'd learned, was the only foundation strong enough to build a real life on, and I was finally ready to build again.